Ja, welkom terug. Ik ga het even in het Engels doen. Welcome back. Kaspar Korjus uit Estonia die staat hier te wachten, dus ik zal het even aankondigen in het Engels. For the second part of this morning, we will talk about trust in a platform. Three different speakers, three different views on trust in a platform. From a country view, Estonia, and you will hear the ambition of Estonia soon enough. From an ICO perspective, we have Hugo Leitens, a Dutch startup, and he will talk about his adventure, I would like to say, to get money for his blockchain initiative, another type of platform. And we will end with Rens Liemann, and Rens experienced working for a platform himself. As a journalist, he went sort of undercover, and he will talk and share with us the idea how it is to have an algorithm as a boss. So that's the menu for till lunch. That being said, I would like to introduce Kaspar Korjus. I'm proud and happy that he is here. He is the managing director of the e-residency program of Estonia. Maybe you already heard about the stories of Estonia, which makes it possible to become a citizen of that country without actually living in that country, which is quite unique. And of course, he will try also to convince you after his talk to leave our beautiful Holland and become a citizen of Estonia. So let's see how convincing he is in that. But it's also about business, and I think that's a very interesting angle, a business case behind the whole plan. He is being put on number 1 by Forbes for his view and persistence to get technology into the Estonia system. Under 30, I will ask you how old you now are, but you are number 1 for all the people under 30. And I would like to ask you, Kaspar, to tell us all about trust in Estonia. Kaspar Korjus.
Hello. Yes, I do not try to convince you to become Estonian yet, maybe digital Estonian, but perhaps I would like to speak generally the trust issue between citizens and nations. And will ever people trust their nations again with digital matters? And will they ever anyway trust their nations? With younger people, we can see that we don't really get the role of nations anymore. Like with blockchain distributed networks, we can find trust elsewhere. Why should we trust someone appointed somewhere who can take bribery and decide on matters randomly? So the trust there on nations really concerns me, and yeah, with the Forbes, then I was 26, but now I'm 30, and still trying to find a way how nations kind of remain relevant. And to remain relevant, then I have put together like kind of 10 steps of digital adaptation for nation states. Those steps don't have to exactly be in that order, or they not exactly have to happen, but for me it inspires that there can be a way how nations stay relevant. And that's why I'm working for Estonian government and helping then other nations also in this technology adoption. And we have some few questions also later. If you find some time and have questions, then we can do that. But before going to the 10 phases of tech adoption, let's go a bit back from history and see the role of nations. A bit back, few million years, humans in that sense have existed for a long time. They gathered in smaller groups. They were more nomad, like digital nomads today, kind of. And arguably, science says that they were quite happy, as happy the science has taken this study. Just out of those millions of years, 12,000 years ago, the agriculture revolution, where people managed to gather in large amounts, survived for longer years and had very long working hours. And the Industrial Revolution, in that sense, it's just a matter of hundreds of years. It's so small amount of time in the history of what we have been existing here. And together with the Industrial Revolution, of course, nation states. And for some reason, I think we take nation states quite as granted as they are today, that they're supposed to be like that, and they quite the same remain. But they won't. I don't believe that. Nations are like, imagine what I like to say, that imagine that you were born on Facebook and you were randomly allocated to one Facebook group and you need to live on that group forever. And it's kind of, you may end up in a great group, like fans of e-residency. Or you may find in another group, and kind of you need to stick with their values. And this is what I see happens with nations, that you were born in somewhere, and whether you like it or not, it's quite difficult to change that. And this causes different problems. And those values are forced to you, and you can't kind of choose between them. And what's happening now, of course, is that the role of nations can't stay as it is, because the role of work, the future work, is going to change dramatically of where and how we work. And together with that, people will have more location independence. Travel to work and live where they want to. And this is going to reshape nations, and this is what we are trying to do also in the EU and in the Estonian level, to see how to stay relevant there. So, how can tech help nations to stay relevant? 10 phases. Easy as that. Phase 1. Phase 1 of the technology adoption, I would call that faking digital. This is where most nations today are. When technology first came there, then you had these scanners, they're still there, papers which you need to print. Usually if you're going to some online forum on governments, you have this PDF which you need to print out, and it looks quite ugly, and then you need to like write there and, I don't know, put signature and then scan and then send somewhere, and then someone else will type it to their computer again. You know, it enhances a bit citizens' lives, but it's not for that. Technology wasn't meant for that, for sure. Phase 2. In Estonia, in that sense, we were lucky, because after becoming re-independent, 1991, kind of, we managed to kind of skip that phase. And that helped us kind of to not to deal with that kind of legacy systems out there. Skipping also all the banking checks and all that stuff. So we managed to go to the second phase. And there are like, I would say like 10, 15 nations today in the second phase. In Estonia, the second phase, which I call switching to digital, actual digital, happened in 2001, 2002. And also in Netherlands, been there, at least at some extent, for quite some time. Meaning that every person in Estonia then has digital identity, of course, and using that, you don't need to have those ugly PDF forms or scan anything, or you can just log into any service, fill the data, digital design, and you have the license, or you have submitted some forms, etc. And it really makes people's lives easier. And I remember my father, even like 15 years ago, had to travel between cities to sign some papers as a businessman. And it seemed very ridiculous. And now, like, to imagine that it's just a matter of a few seconds to do that. And it's been in my life, as a norm, like I can't remember life in any other way. Sometimes when I'm asked to put signature somewhere, then I don't know what to do with my hand. So I'll just do randomly something. This is great, but it really doesn't really still make our lives convenient, because governments are hassling us with all the different information what they require from us, which kind of they already have anyway. So phase 3 in Estonia in mid-2000s, so 15 or so years ago, I would call operating efficiently, meaning that governments will use the data what they have already to enhance your lives. And I'll give you some examples. This is the screenshot of our data exchange layer. For example, one of that dot is each different register, so it's also decentralized. Actually 2 weeks ago, I updated my driver's license. So I went to one of the green dot, which is driving license server, and then they told me that my license need to be updated. For that, I need to have health insurance and health check done. Can we access your data in health registry? I said, all right. This was done. Then the second question, hey, we need a new photograph of you. By the way, 2 years ago, we applied a new passport and we have a photo of you. Can we use that? I said, yes. And then there were some other 3, 4 questions, and they asked information to access, where I'm living, my property, etc. I gave that access, and the driving license were there after 2 days at home. And it took me less than a minute. Because all the data is there, I don't need to go to different ministries, different agencies to apply anything, to get anything. I can give them rights to use the existing data. And that means that 99% of activities are done automatically behind the scenes. But the core here is, especially with today's conference here, is the trust. How do people trust the system? All the data is up there. And I would argue that with today's technology, it is much, much higher level of trust than any paper-based system. Because of blockchain and because of timestamps and encryption and digital identities and all of those technologies together, I have a record who has accessed my data when and whether they had right to do that. And because of legislation is supporting me as a citizen, I can kind of sue them if they didn't have rights to access my data. And the blockchain also records all those activities, so it kind of gives me the trust that I don't need to trust any government official or employee. I can trust the system, trust the code. Phase 4, becoming borderless. So once you're fully digital, then the question is, why should you restrict your services to those borders which you own, kind of? This land. In Estonia, this happened in 2014. The program was called e-residency, it still is, and the purpose is that every person on the planet can become our digital resident or digital citizen. And this, in theory, it means that kind of nation states will have now new relations to people out there. So far you had citizens, you had residents, and then you had strangers. Now, instead of strangers, we have users, or digital citizens. And the growth of nation is not dependent anymore on the land you own, or the citizens you own, who work for you. The power of your nation and the size of your nation depends how many users you have. How many people have subscribed to your nation? How many people use your services? Today, most e-residents join to become and have the business environment what they need, especially from outside the EU. They come here, they establish EU company, bank account, they run their company. And Estonia, of course, wins a lot, not from taxation, they pay taxes at home, but services what we offer them. And now it's in exponential growth. This year, more e-residents and companies established than all the 3 previous years together. And this continues throughout the 4 years, which kind of means that after 3 years, there are more e-residency companies than Estonian companies in Estonia. And I can see that after 7, 8 years, this is a major source of income for the nation. And the crazy thing is to think about exponential growth is that if it doesn't stop, it's becoming pretty scary. Because the 11th years is higher than all the 10 first years together. And what it happens to nations and how it reshapes them, I think this is fascinating. Because then we don't need to have these monopolies where you are stuck to, and even if they offer bad services, you kind of need to use them. No. Already that 2 other nations are offering their e-residences, 3 other are coming in 5 or so years' time, you are e-resident of 10 different nations and you choose different services from different nations. And if your home country lacks the skills and user experience, then you can subscribe to other nations. And this makes, what I see, the real value, makes nations to collaborate, to cooperate, to compete in a new level, which would make services better and enhance our lives. But this is phase 4. Phase 5 is moving to cloud. In Estonia, it happened now a year or so ago. Hopefully, we don't need to use that ever, but in theory, the question is why nations would need land anyway. So if something happens, and let's be politically correct, let's say natural disaster, and we don't have our land because of some disaster, and then it's one button that we need to click, and not only our data is going to be backed. At the moment, the first pilot is in Luxembourg, but also our services are up and running. I'm still going to vote who is going to represent our parliament. Cabinet decisions will still be made, like today, digitally. I'm going to still pay taxes digitally. I'm going to still marry digitally. Everything continues. And the program is called Data Embassy, meaning that there are embassies, not people working there, but data centers. So it's Estonian land in Luxembourg, and Luxembourg needs to take care of that land and safeguard that. So moving to cloud and becoming independent also from your land which you own. Next phase is Estonia hasn't really enhanced yet, but I can see that in somewhere the first steps have been taken. The thing is that nations don't need to offer services only by themselves. We can offer APIs and codes for private sector to basically build all the nations themselves. We have first examples, like for example, you can establish a company today in Estonia without ever visiting government site or use any other service, but basically service by service, give the tools to private sector and let them build your nation. Phase 7, becoming invisible. This is the phase which I would call that the first time ever government is not hassling you. Even with all the data exchange, government still requires something from you. You need to do something for the government. This is, I would say, first time an actual government is going to do something for you. And we have first examples here, like becoming invisible, meaning that, for example, if I'm getting 65 years old, I don't need to apply for pensions. Government, I can give access to government my data and they can just allocate me money. Or if child is born, allocated kindergarten positions. Or anything else, also using big data to start recommending services and automate everything. Phase 8, tokenizing ecosystem. I published some blogs last summer regarding launching Estcoin, would be national cryptocurrency. Back then, actually it would be like just tokens where you can kind of buy a share of Estonia, let's say. Like you could buy a share of any company. And you would be the owner of Estonia. Using that, all those millions of e-residents in future could be part of us, could gain when Estonia is gaining something, and could be actually something more than just using services. And we are going to launch community, and together with that, after some years, those tokens where people can start exchanging value and investing them. This would make and transform the revenue models of nation states. Instead of taxation, we can have something different. We can have subscription, we can have tokenized ecosystem. Taxation doesn't have to stay there. People hate that anyway. Once we have, let's say, after 7 or so years, 10 million e-residents, we can just ask €1 per month per e-resident and don't need taxation. So those roles and models can also change the revenue models of nation. Next phase, what I see is maybe after 30, 40, 50 years, scientists argue when the general AI is more powerful. At the moment we have like very narrow AIs, which solve some of the cases. But it would be, I think, stupid to even imagine that AI wouldn't totally disrupt nation states. Like today already, algorithms kind of recommend me what should I eat, what movies should I watch. Many of my friends have got married through AI, which recommends who to partner. Because humans do mistakes, and maybe we overestimate the look in the long term. And AIs can be better, knowing all the data if you give it to them. And if these things are happening in private life, if of course it's going to happen with nation states. Today nations are very reactive. Sometimes they take some studies and analyze. It takes 7 years before we understand, oh, we should change taxation. It could be within an hour. Like we can see what's happening in the world. Oh, now in Eastern Europe, Estonian part, we should lower taxes 2% for that industry. 4% there to increase. Oh, we need 100 more employees in that industry after 1 month. Let's work for that. All of those recommendations and study can be done by AI. And what I imagine, it would really eliminate that kind of huge amount of mistakes and this show what you have seen before here, like this populism show of politics. Because it's like theater, like you watch that and it's like entertaining. And if those mistakes can't be taken by politicians and decision makers anymore, individuals who are like determining the lives of millions of people, then I have much belief in that. And once we start clicking the green button, is like if AI is giving us decisions, we're doing that for 20 or so years. Eventually you just think that why should I click the green button anyway? Let the AI just function there and make decisions for me. And once this is happening, and the system, the AI is not only by Amazons and Googles, but there is also some nations at least who have managed to build some AI. Then the question is that we don't need hundreds of different nations who have their AIs. We can share them. It doesn't mean that we would eliminate our cultures or anything. It can even more empower our cultures. But we don't need separate smart services, smart nations to serve us. We can use the same. And I'll see that many nations who share the same values, whether it's in Nordics, can share also the code which runs our nations. So with that, I believe that this is just one way. It doesn't have to happen like that. You can see more and more borders nowadays, but I hope that this way will happen, because I think nations are becoming independent from its own physical land, citizens, services, revenue, and start serving us as never before. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. I think you just explained digital heaven. It exists, it's your country. But can you also tell me anything about the physical part of the country? How are the people? Is the weather nice? You know, should I live there?
I think every nation is worth visiting for at least a month in a row. In Estonia at the moment, like basically there is no darkness. Even 1 or 2 a.m. there's light outside. So
is it good? Is it nice?
It's awesome, you know. It's like light and everyone is more shining. But yeah, during November, December, I would visit some other nations.
Like?
I've been here like 4 times per year in Netherlands, so I like much.
So, and we were just talking before your talk here, and as you probably know, our king is visiting your country, and then you told me yes, and I'm seeing him tomorrow. So tomorrow you will have how many minutes?
4 minutes with His Majesty.
So I'm so curious. What are you? I mean, are you offering him an e-kingdomship or something? But you know, expand his
the market for that is too small, you know, just. But definitely, I would like to share within that 4 minutes, like the story of why and how we should trust digitalization and empower that, not to stop that.
Do you think he will become a resident of your country?
I think it would be politically too difficult.
Maybe you give him some money, or so it's money enough. Yeah. So one of the questions from the audience was about Facebook. Are you seeing Facebook as a possible competitor? Could Facebook be? Yeah.
And that's why it's a very good question, and that's why I like to strengthen the power of nations and them to stay relevant, because I quite see that it's quite inevitable that these virtual nations are becoming we're becoming too dependent from them, and there are already examples. We don't need to like imagine that. There are nations, let's say in some emerging countries, where you don't have any like. Basically, Facebook's the only source where you go to, only source where you, for example, read news. And that's not bad. It's great that they have become so good and people want to use them, of course. But eventually, how you can become and share your news if you pay more. So, and eventually there are 2 or 3 kind of players who dominate what is going to happen in the world, in politics, in social and everything. And this needs some regulations for net neutrality, some regulations for privacy. And that's why I hope that, like in future, like besides those AIs who are like from private sector, there are competitive AIs from nation sides, which would also come with regulations which matter.
So, I was just while you were talking, I was thinking. So, will Estonia become a Facebook the other way around, so that you can like?
Usually, first movers crash. So, whoever. It's quite painful road to take that, so whoever comes second or third usually wins.
Okay.
So, but yeah, we do empower, and for example with Finland already, there is a lot of data exchange between our nations, so if I fall sick in Finland, I can call my pharmacist in Estonia, I can go to their pharmacy and get my medicine. So the data exchange can happen cross-border already, and now when AI is going to be there, then we can start sharing that already. So we are already start collaborating, because it just makes sense.
Okay. So one last advice, if people want to become citizen, what can they do?
Citizen, then physically come to Estonia, see if you also survive winter. But if you want to become digital resident, then go to online, it's 100 euros, and you're one.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you. U kunt die S-coin kopen, u kunt ook de retail coin kopen. Het staat nu op het programma. Ik wil graag Hugo Leitens aankondigen. In de bevestiging stond een andere spreker, Hanjo Masterbroek van Mijn Vastgoed. Ook een ICO, maar die heeft helaas moeten afzeggen vanwege persoonlijke omstandigheden.